So let's start with the first one there, the Four Corners. That's the one that where we all kind of converged together. What were some of the most surprising things that you and Steve discovered in that investigation?
Well, what intrigues me about the Four Corners region, and for those who don't know, maybe I don't know, I think it's Colorado. It's where Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah meet.
Yeah.
And the borders of those four states come together in an area called the Four Corners region. And that's where that's from which it derives its name. So that area and the area surrounding it is very well known in the ufology community, because there's a lot of alleged underground bases there. Of course, there's the Dulce base, there's the Los Alamos base that's not far away. There's the famous Area 51, the S4 facility. So there's a lot of UFO type activity there, a lot of ufological lore associated with that area. And so I'm always fascinated with that part of the country precisely because of the ufological significance that it's always had. But which I think is probably part of the reason why there's so much activity in that area is because of all of the lore pertaining to the natives that once inhabited that area, that inhabited to this day, and of course the mysterious Anasazi people who once inhabited the Four Corners area that disappeared overnight. And it was surprising, I think, for all of us to you hear about the Anasazi, you hear about their cliff dwelling structures that they built. But to actually be there and see what these guys built, the thing that struck us immediately was that these people were in a defensive position. They feared for their lives. They were not building defensive structures because, as the conventional narrative states, because there was drought and this and there was conflict, and then they migrated away from the area. Whatever that conservative, I should say, the traditional narrative states, in reality, these guys were defending themselves from some external threat that they were deathly afraid of. And that was apparent in the little indentations on the rocks on the face of the cliffs, where it's hard to imagine adults being able to climb up into these little sanctuaries that they built on the side of the cliffs.
Who would build something like that unless they absolutely had to? You got I mean, basically, like their town isn't their little community, you know, embedded in the side of a cliff, and then you got these little tiny holes that they would climb to get out.
Yeah, little handholds, basically.
I mean, but if you fall, you're dead. I mean, it's really...
And they're very shallow handholds. You have to be very adept at climbing these rock faces. Why would you do that? I mean, and the Anasazi were the biggest community in the area. So who were they afraid of? And of course, Tom postulates, and we all postulate together there, that they were afraid of giants. That the Navajo story concerning the Anasazi and other native tribes that have stories that are similar to this are true to some degree. That there was some kind of scenario in which the Anasazi encountered a race of giants that were cannibalistic and were beginning to devour them and oppress them and attack them, and that the Anasazi were eaten out of existence or fled, or both. And that's our thesis on the Anasazi, and I think that certainly Tom's work and then our exploration gives credence to that idea.
And that kind of makes more sense with some of the evidence too, because in those communities where there was just a disappearance of some kind, I mean, there's bags of salt left, you know, I mean, if the traditional account of a drought, if that was true, it seems like they would have had more time to prepare to get their things out of there, but it's like they left suddenly.
They took off immediately. And this then leads us into the Smithsonian cover-up.